We're going to start with the education liaison for Mayor Parker. This guy is just a great guy, man. I really love the fact that we're showing you a whole bunch of people that are really defining what they do instead of waiting for their jobs to define them. So this is a perfect example of that. Everybody, Mark Cuevas.
Hey, first of all, just so it's not weird later on, I'm going to have to juggle my mic with the clicker and my notes. And mistakes like that are going to happen. So when it happens, especially if I drop this and it goes down here, I'm going to need somebody to pick it up, okay? So when I was in high school, I loved playing basketball. I played basketball all the time. I was what you call a gym rat, all right? And they called us gym rats because we were impossible to get out of the gym. We're always trying to sneak in. And I didn't just play basketball. I would practice basketball. Like, I would do practice drills all the time. So every day, the goal that I set out was to get better. And I figured if I keep working hard, I'll get better every day. And if I get better every day, sooner or later, I'm going to be successful. So I had one problem, which I'll get into in a little bit. The big problem, or what was not as big of a problem, I should say, that I had was that I wasn't the typical basketball player. Now, I'm going to break down a basketball team for you real quick. 5 players on a team, 2 guards. Your guards are the shortest, usually the fastest guys. You also have 2 forwards. They're a little taller than the guards, usually a little bigger too. Then you have your center. Your center usually stands about, in the NBA, 6'10" to 7 feet tall, anywhere between 250 to 300 pounds. They're the biggest guys on the court, right? Now, I was about 5'10" and 150 pounds soaking wet when I played high school basketball. And my big problem was actually that I was just a really bad basketball player, okay? I tried hard and I practiced hard, and if I had to dive for a ball, I was going to be on the floor for it. But I was just bad. The one redeeming quality that I had, though, was my grit. And the fact that I was willing to persevere no matter how bad I was. I was willing to persevere. And my coach saw that in me. So his bright idea was my senior year of high school to start me at center. First game of the season, we're playing Hitchcock High School. Now, Hitchcock had a center that was like half Sasquatch, half Manimal. This guy, I'm not exaggerating, don't laugh. He was scary. This guy was like built like a refrigerator, and he was 7 feet tall. So I go over to half court like I've been coached to do, and I don't want to look up at the guy because that would look pretty dumb, and I didn't want to just stare at him because I'd be staring at his sternum, and that would be equally dumb. So I walk away, and I go to my friend Christopher. Christopher was our starting point guard, and he was taller and could jump higher than me. So I go to Christopher, my best friend on the team, and say, "Hey, C, do the jump ball for me." He says, "No." I'm like, "Come on, man. You're taller than me." He says, "No." I said, "C, you jump higher than me too." And he looks at me and he says, "No, you're the center. Go to center court." So I'm like, all right. I walk back, and I'm thinking, I'm going to take this guy on. I'm going to give him everything I got. So I go back with swagger. I'm sizing this guy. I had swagger then. I'm sizing this guy up, and I'm thinking, I got this. So I look at the ref. Ref blows the whistle. We get down. Ball goes up in the air. I jump, and I don't even think the other guy jumped. I think he just kind of tipped the ball to his friend. And that was the start of the game. That's also kind of summarizes my career as a center in high school basketball. The real lesson that I learned that day was that I was always going to come across 7-foot centers. There's no way around it, really. Matter of fact, as I continued to play center, I started half the games that season as center. It was a traumatizing year for me. But as I continued to play, I realized, okay, I can't post this guy up. I can't get a jump shot off over him. But I can run longer distances than most people. So my goal was to outrun the centers that I played against over and over. And sometimes that's just the approach you have to take. If you can't beat a basketball player at basketball, then outrun them, okay? Growing up, I just always knew that I felt a little different. I never really kind of fit in. Now, I was an average kid by any typical standard. I wasn't born into poverty. I didn't have any insurmountable obstacles. I fit into what most people would describe as average, but I never really felt normal. And there's a really big distinction there, right? And I want to spend a little bit of time just talking about that. Average is mathematically defined as taking a group of numbers, adding them together, and then dividing them by the size of the list. We do this primarily for two reasons. One, to figure out where essentially a group stands, and also to be able to compare one group to the other. Normal includes a judgmental element that average doesn't contain. Normal, think of the root word norm, is more about conforming. It's us choosing to go to what the norm is. And sometimes confusion between those two can make us think that norm is the same as average. And for me to be average, or for me to be normal, then I should just do what the average is doing. And that's a really sad world to grow up in, right? And I'm going to tell you guys something that I think a lot of you can relate to. And the same thing that you all deal with in high school, a lot of times it's the same thing that we deal with in the professional world. We're all afraid of failing differently than most of the people around us. Now, if we fail the same way, we're forgiven for that because everybody else is failing the same way. But once we stick our neck out and we try to do something different, and we want to be a different person or try a new way to solve an old problem, then that's where we're attacked. And the people who want to be able to be normal and want to do an average job, a lot of times will attack you to make themselves feel greater than average. Now, I'm going to show you guys another just concrete example. This is my office, right? My office is, I feel like it's not incredibly messy, but most people that come in are kind of taken back by my office. It helps when you can not just see all the stuff that I stack on the floor, but also I have like 3 whiteboards that are full of numbers, and I have 2 wall maps that include the same data that's on the whiteboards, but I just like to look at it different ways. I used to feel like I had to apologize for my office and would tell people, oh, I'm sorry, my office is such a mess, but truthfully, like, this is my office clean. And then one day I saw this. Now, this is Albert Einstein's office on the day that he died. So you know he was not finished working on stuff. This is him mid-projects somewhere, E equals MC squared. And I thought, man, that's really cool. I can relate to that. And I heard a quote that I thought was really cool from Albert Einstein, and he said, if a cluttered desk is the sign of a cluttered mind, of what then is the sign of an empty desk? Now, Einstein was a very funny guy. He was facetious. And of course, he wasn't trying to say that if you have a clean desk, you have an empty mind. But he was saying, isn't it kind of silly to assume that if a desk is cluttered, then there's a cluttered mind that it belongs to, and if a desk is empty, that there must be an empty desk that it belongs to. So the big thing is not just, okay, I have an excuse now to have an empty office, or a cluttered office. What I began to accept a little more was that, the same ways that I approach problems differently, maybe it's cool that I approach how I organize my office differently, because I organize things in my head a little bit differently as well. I usually try to define things in terms of relationships, the relationships in the context around them, and less for what specifically is being discussed. So really, when you think about it, if you took a normal office, right, and created a scale between normal office and Einstein's office, I'm actually a lot closer to being normal, like Einstein's office, than the typical office. It's not every day that I get to be that close to Albert Einstein, but I'm going to take it. That one's mine. This is what I do, like, in a large degree with my job. Try to find different ways to look at things. I get to work in the Department of Neighborhoods at the City of Houston. Part of my responsibility is handling education initiatives for Mayor Parker. My favorite thing about my job is to be able to take information that's been organized a certain way for a very long time and try to find new ways to organize it. It's the fact that I'm able to accept that I organize information differently and I process information differently that help me try to do things like draw comparisons between concentration of libraries around after-school programs and other schools, things that are going on, because we can address new things from a neighborhood level in ways that we weren't able to see them before. But I don't want to talk about my work as much, because for me to embrace that I may have a different way of looking at things is one thing, but that doesn't really create change, because it's not about individuals, and it just doesn't stop with you accepting it's okay that I do things differently. You have to find the people who have your mutual weirdness to be able to grow. You have to surround yourself by the people that are also okay with looking at things differently, to help you understand how you can see things in a new way. So because of this, we've been able to work with some very cool people in the city of Houston. Mapping things is fine, that's one thing. But I've learned so much in some of my partners because they want to take, and they have taken, social media to create networks so that local businesses can communicate with each other and build community around that communication. Because when they're able to support each other, then they're not taking their business approach as it's me against the world, but we're in this together. And they do it with other people who want to support local businesses, local initiatives. I've been able to work with some really cool folks who want to take all of the federal, state, local, and nonprofit services that go across health, social services, education, and on. We want to take these things and organize them once and for all so they make sense to families. So when you say, I've got a problem, and I have to start with my problem to understand where to find these services, then we're organizing it so it makes sense to families and not just so it makes sense to bureaucracy. The big thing that I have to accept in my work, and anybody that wants to change the community around them has to accept, is the fact that unfortunately change is the exception. For everything that we may want to do, every program that we may want to institute, we have to do 100 things right to build a program, to build a piece of technology for it to work. But it only takes one thing to go wrong with the project or in the life of the individuals that we're trying to touch for it to fall apart. It's not just about accepting ourselves, but accepting each other, that we're not okay with normal being the fact that 1 out of 4 kids in Harris County don't have health insurance, that 1 out of 4 kids in Harris County don't have a meal on their plate every day for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. These things have been normal for too long. It's about us working together, not just as organizations, but as people who don't want to be normal. It's about us figuring out what our 7-footers are, whether they're our individual 7-footers or the 7-footers that we place in the community. But most of all, it's about us each doing our part as individuals to collectively try very hard not to be normal. Thank you. Thanks, man. You're good.